with that down, let's move on to main topic number 4. And our 4th main topic today gets submitted to us by Vlad. And Vlad writes, should movie studios be allowed to own streaming services? They were prevented from owning their own theaters for a reason. Doesn't that reason also apply to streaming? All right, thanks a lot for sending that in, Vlad. And, for those of you who don't know what he's talking about, there was, for a long period of time, a set of rules. I think it was called the Paramount Decrees, if I'm not mistaken. Yep. There was a set of rules that basically said, and these were around since, the earliest days of Hollywood, that says, look, movie studios cannot own movie theaters. They just thought it created too much of a monopoly in the industry. They thought it was bad for the consumer. They didn't basically think that this was the right approach for things like that. And for a long time, that was the rule. Now, the Paramount decrees made it back into the news not too long ago because those decrees were finally overturned. They say, in today's environment, that doesn't really apply. So Vlad actually raises an interesting question about, should the studios be allowed to own their own streaming services? Should they be allowed to be essentially the producers and distributors, but also the exhibitors all at the same time, basically completing their own, ecosphere, if you will, of here's our entertainment. Come on into Disney Plus. We will make the movies. We will market the movies, and we will deliver the movie to you. All that kind of stuff. I think you're right in one sense. There is a little bit of something to be concerned about when that comes, when, one company basically owns the entire pipeline. I agree. There are some drawbacks to that. But at the same time, if we were to say that, you know what, guys, if you make these movies, you can't directly deliver them to people at home. You cannot be the ones delivering the product. If that was the case, then what does that say about Apple stores? Full disclosure, half of my household income comes from Apple and, of course, works for Apple. So I'm just using this as an example, okay? I'm not trying to promote Apple products as I come to you on a PC computer. But you would then essentially have to say that if you're Apple, you can't be allowed to have Apple stores. You can't be the producer of a product and then be the one to market and sell it directly to the consumer. You're not allowed to do that. Essentially, too, if you want to stretch it a little bit thin, you'd also have to say that about McDonald's. I mean, okay, you can make the burger, you can promote it, you can make commercials for it, but, somebody else has to sell the burger. You can't sell the burger yourself. That is obviously not something that you can allow to have happen. But then what does that say about Netflix? Netflix for a long time was simply the exhibitor. They were the people. Netflix just took other people's content and then delivered it to you. Should Netflix not be allowed to get into the business of then producing their own stuff? Because now essentially Netflix is now a studio, but they were an exhibitor first. So I understand, guys, and I don't know how you two feel about this, but I understand that there's an initial kind of thought about, should this monopoly be in tech? But with the Paramount decrees, guys, there was also another key factor with the consumer. If, let's say, for argument's sake, Warner Brothers owned the local movie theater, well, then that meant that consumers in that area wouldn't be able to see the newest Universal film, or they wouldn't be able to see, the latest, Fox's film or whatever, because their theater is owned by Warner Brothers, and Warner Brothers is only going to put out Warner Brothers movies and it created a lot of questions at that time. But today, it's not like in my neighborhood, I can only get Disney Plus. Oh, you live in that area of town? Well, that area of town is only serviced by Disney Plus. No, you can get any service you want anywhere at any time. So I understand the apprehension, but I just think with today's context and the way this works, I really think those things don't apply. By the way, I just want to throw out there that our friends, Soul Brother Mac sends in a super chat badge, as does our friend Connie Sang. Thank you, Connie. Connie sends in a super chat badge. Cersei also sends in a $10 super chat badge. Thank you, Cersei. Black Bono Lala sends in a super chat badge. Thank you guys very much. Appreciate that. Anyway, guys, the question to you, Greg, there was a reason the Paramount decrees were a law for a long time, but they struck them down because the context has changed. How do you think that applies now to the idea of studios creating content and then owning the streaming service that delivers it. How do you see this?
I'm so glad I'm going first on this because I'm sure whatever Rob has to say is going to blow my commentary out of the water.
No.
Well, welcome to my life. Welcome to my life, Greg.
I mean, I'm with you, John, in the sense of how I don't personally view this as the same thing as a studio owning a movie theater. Like, on my own sentimental, philosophical, nostalgic approach to it, is I do think theaters should be a shared space for the studios. That's just what I personally believe. Like, do you guys remember that situation where Quentin Tarantino had his Hateful Eight movie pushed out by Disney at the Cinerama Dome for a little bit? That's exactly why I don't think studios should own movie theaters for purposes like that. Like, that story always comes to mind as like a scary factor. To me, a streaming service is just not the same thing. Like, it's an entirely separate beast. You know, like, while you're not competing for the same space, I think. I know some people might say, well, I can't afford, both Paramount Plus and HBO Max. What do I do? But that's the thing, is you still got a choice. You still have a choice in the matter. Like, the way I guess the best way to draw a comparison here of how I believe like a movie theater should be a shared space, I feel like that applies with the streaming services in a way. I would say whatever you stream from, whether it be your Roku TV or your PlayStation 5, whatever it may be, the streaming services you choose to pay for are what's playing in the auditoriums. That's how I essentially view it. So I don't think there's anything like everything you brought up about, Netflix, of how they were once the exhibitor and now they actually produce their own content as well. It's just not the same thing as actually competing for the same space.
Exactly.
It's 100% different. And I really do think that, you get to choose what plays on your streaming service. You get to pick it and you don't have to worry about it not being available on your streaming device. Whereas in a theater, you run the risk of that gambit of, oh, well, now the theater that I used to go to is now bought by Universal. So they're only playing Universal movies when I wanted to go watch this Warner Brothers movie. You're not going to run into that issue. So
Fast 9, 24/7, baby. All day. All day.
Exactly.
Rob, Rob, this is something that's kind of, we talked at length when the Paramount decrees stuff was going on and they were striking it down. We talked about the pros and the cons of that happening, but it really does seem like it's a separate thing. What do you think about, because I think this is probably going to become a little bit of an issue as we move forward, because I hate to bring this up, but when it comes to the internet, we do kind of live in a draconian kind of system in the sense that where I live, I don't really have a choice as to what internet service I get. I can either get Spectrum or I can get some cheap phone line, basically, kind of internet. Like, and that's still where, like, people in the United States don't really have a choice as to what their internet service provider is going to be. Not really. And, I'd hate to think that maybe that could become in the future, but I'm not really worried about that in this situation. Rob, what do you think about the notion of, hey, should there be limitations on content creators having their own streaming channels, and how does it differ from the theatrical version?
Well, I think Greg did a good job of explaining that. I mean,
yes.
But before, I mean, like he just said, movie theaters were a shared space that studios had to compete with to get space to show their product. These streaming services are a direct conduit to the consumer. The studios are just selling their product directly to the consumer. Now, the internet service providers are providing the actual tools with which the studios need to use to get their product directly to the consumer. It's like if you were selling heroin, the internet companies are the people giving you your works, giving you your needles and that's kind of what they're doing. And I think that's problematic. Maybe that was not the best analogy for our audience.
I love that.
You know what? I was thinking about Requiem for a Dream. It was a movie.
That explains it. Yes.
I was thinking about Requiem for a Dream. Which is on a beautiful 4K disc. Now, if that's the kind of movie you want, boy, you can watch it over and over. No, you can't. But anyway, so the studios are cutting out the middleman, and they're if you want to, I actually, one of the things I love about Disney Plus is their streaming service is really the entire legacy and history of their company. And I love that. I mean, I love that they're going to eventually, hopefully they can get the rights issues taken care of for the original Mickey Mouse Club or whatever. But you'll be able to eventually, in my mind, have every single thing Disney ever made.
Mhm.
And I like that. I mean, the hardest course I ever took in college was the history of Disney, because it was taught by this. It was like the John Houseman of paper chase of Disney fans. It was insane. It was so hard. There was so much reading and so much to remember. It was like the worst history class ever, even though it was about Disney. But I like the fact that you're getting that legacy. And in the same way, HBO Max is that for Warner Brothers, Peacock is going to be that way for Disney. And I kind of like that we have these things available to us, and there's no monopoly over the theater space. You know, I mean, you can choose to subscribe to Disney Plus or not. So I think it's fine. It's not like the Paramount decrees and what was happening there. But even that, I mean, when you can buy things directly from the studios, what I'm most worried about is movie theaters themselves. I would like to preserve the movie-going experience. And I think that if anything, I mean, Black Widow and the debate around making Black Widow available on Disney Plus, what does that do to the theater experience? But most importantly, what does it do to the business of owning movie theaters? And I want to see movie theaters continue to flourish and be a vibrant business model, but they're currently under attack. And that's a bummer.
I happen to have heard, quick side note, won't make this a topic. There's a real fight going on over at Disney right now. There's a real intense internal battle going on over at Disney right now, but maybe we'll talk about that another time. Anyway, guys, the question is for you. What do you think about this? I mean, yes, there was a reason why the Paramount decrees had to be there, because it was practically a certain set of circumstances. The circumstances are different now, and digital presents a different realm. But do you still see there being potential shortfalls of it? What do you guys think? Jump down into the comment section below and let me know your thoughts. All right, guys.